Shabbat Shalom. This week is the fourth week of the Omer, associated with the Sphira, with the aspect of God that manifests itself in the world as Netzach. We know these words from the end of the Kedusha. Ulenetzach netzachim kedushatcha nagdish. Netzach netzachim. We will now and stood by us in solidarity, and I celebrate the fact that we have a different relationship with the non-Jewish community and with our but carrying the memory of it is a productive thing for us. And then it also reminds us of the netzach, of the endurance and the dedication and the fortitude of those who came before us. This idea of endurance, I'm going to read a little bit from our book, from our booklet, the Spiritual Guide to the Counting of the Omer. Endurance means to be alive, to be driven by healthy and productive goals. It's the readiness to fight for what you believe, to go all the way. Without such commitment, any undertaking remains flat and empty. Netzach is an energy that comes from within and stops at nothing to achieve its goals. This, of course, requires that endurance, that Netzach, be closely examined to ensure that it's used in a healthy and a productive manner. And God forbid, not the other way. So these questions: how committed am I to my values? How much would I fight for them? Am I easily swayed? What price am I willing to pay for my beliefs? Is there any truth for which I would be ready to give up my life? And when I read these words, they remind me of a time when so many Jews gave up their lives, endured persecution in order to keep the Jewish faith, to keep the Jewish people alive. They fought for their beliefs. It meant that much to them. And we are the inheritors of that netzach, of that endurance, of that fortitude. And so I think that's where I went with my Amidah this morning. I say these words not because they reflect, thank God, not because they reflect the current relationship that we have, but because they recall a different time. And there's something strong that moves us towards reconciliation when that reconciliation includes memory, and because they're a precious inheritance to me of the endurance and dedication of the Jewish people in the past. Today, Hayom Shlosha ve'esrim yom shehem shlosha shavuot u'shnei yamim la'omer. Today is 23 days, which are 3 weeks and 2 days of the Omer. And because each week we are landing on the second day of the week, we're going to return to this aspect of givurah, of discipline. And so today is discipline in endurance. And we're asked to examine the discipline of our endurance. Is my endurance and determination focused to cultivate good habits and to break bad ones, right? So the discipline is sort of how are we disciplined about it? Do we have habits? We all have habits, but do we have good habits? And is our endurance, is this aspect of determination cultivating good habits and helping to break bad ones? Right, so we can express discipline and endurance to try and the truth is that we have to always be pushing back against bad habits. Does my endurance, or is it the other way around? Right? Is our endurance actually sort of continuing bad habits, right, and allowing those to become reinforced? Does my endurance come from a place of strength or weakness? Right? That's a very interesting question. Does it come out of deep conviction, or does it come out of defensiveness? Right? We can have endurance, right, and we can have discipline out of defensiveness. Sometimes we're tenacious out of stubbornness and an unwillingness to acknowledge errors. Right? So there's an aspect to this which is stubborn, right, and keeps us stuck. Right? Or am I invested in certain am I invested in certain decisions and unwilling to review them? Right? So there's a way in which we have to be careful about our discipline, right? That the discipline sometimes can encourage us to change and not to stay the same. Do I use my endurance against itself by being tenacious in my lack of determination? Right? Am I tenacious in my lack of determination? Do I just, am I constantly allowing myself off the hook, right? Or giving up too easily? So the exercise for today is that we should break one bad habit. Right? We should we should use our determination to break one bad habit. And hopefully in the same time, the rabbis say mitzvah, goreret mitzvah, that we'll be building towards a positive direction, towards another mitzvah. So that is our Omer teaching. I hope it's okay. I'm going to take a little bit more time and just speak about something from this week's Parsha. I mentioned, the voices that we carry in our heads, and I was talking about the voices that I hear of campers and staff members who I hear when I sing Mismor Shir LaYom HaShabbat, and I mentioned the voices that I hear, that I think about when I'm davening, when I'm going through the Amidah, and that aspect of voices is very present in this week's Torah portion. I'm reminded, actually, I'll mention a few, it seems like ages ago, but in December, at the beginning of December, I and Alan Friedman, a number of people from the synagogue leadership, Libby and Tal and Leslie Winner, forgive me if I'm forgetting who I'm forgetting, but we went to Boston to the United Synagogue convention, biennial convention. And there was a wonderful speaker who was talking about effective communication. And I'll come back to the communication piece in a second, but she talked about how we actually all carry around a voice in our head. And she said, if you're thinking to yourself that you don't carry around a voice in your head, that would be the voice in your head, which I thought was just sort of this great insight. And I want to bring you just two teachings. Some of them are so good I can't resist. So there's a phrase in this week's Torah portion. There are two Torah portions this week, Achrei Mot-Kedoshim. I'm going to set aside, I'm just going to pick a couple of teachings from Kedoshim. We read V'yareta me'elohecha, that we should fear or stand in awe of our God, of your God, right? We're told, stand in awe or be reverent or stand in fear or fear your God. And it appears in two places. Two places we're told where those extra words are associated with two mitzvot. One of them is where we read lo tekalel cheresh, don't curse a deaf person, v'lifnei iver lo titen michshol, and don't place a stumbling block before the blind person. V'yareta me'elohecha, you should fear your God. I am Adonai. And then a little bit later, when we read mipnei seva takum, so before a seva, an older person, you should rise and you should honor the face of Pnei Zaken, the face of someone who is older. V'yareta me'elohecha, you should you should fear God. I am Adonai. And one of the commentators says that, Rashi says, Lefisha hadavar hazeh eno masur labriot leda im da'ato shel me'ir al kach ze latova o l'ra'ah. He talks about how a person who is blind may, first of all, never find out, that may fall and never find out who it was that put the stumbling block before them. A person who is deaf may never hear the fact that you cursed them because they can't hear. And even a person who is older, this is really, I think, pointing to the fact that that person, as people get older, they get weaker, and you may dishonor them without them ever being aware, because of their weakness. And the Torah here is adding that extra, extra imperative injunction to fear God, because we should carry around a voice in our head that says, I'm going to do what's right, even though I can get away with doing what's not right. I want to acknowledge that the voice in our head sometimes, sometimes the voice in our head, when it's associated with religion, can be paralyzing. We can carry with ourselves a sense of shame that's debilitating, that pushes us down and tells us we're never good enough, and we're always awful, and we're terrible. And therefore you want to go through this process of rebuke, but I want to tell you something. This is very, very hard stuff, to the point that the rabbis in the Talmud actually said that nobody knows how to do this anymore. Nobody knows how to do this anymore. And hopefully, I'm not sure if that means don't even try. I don't think it means that, but it means that this is really hard stuff. So I want to share with you a few interpretations of this verse. Number one, why should you definitely make sure to rebuke? According to one commentator, the reason that you should do that is because Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Bazeh. And what this is a reading of Velo Tisa Alav Chet. Don't bear guilt because of it. One understanding of what's the sin that you commit is that if you see somebody else about to do something bad, or that's done something that's bad, and you say nothing about it, all of Israel is connected with each other. In other words, you can't just say, well, that's their problem, it's not my problem. To be in true relationship with someone, to be part of the Jewish people, is to hold each other accountable. To care for the Jewish people is to say, it matters to me how it is that you act, and so with love and not with hatred, right? I need to hold you accountable for your behavior. Otherwise, I'm going to bear some of what you do is going to reflect on me, and actually it affects me too. Right? It's a very, very difficult but also very deep teaching that we are responsible for each other. And we need to hold each other up in the best way possible. So that's one interpretation of this chet. Don't bear sin because of it. Another interpretation reads this not and don't bear sin, but actually as rebuke, but don't bear sin. Reading the sin as when you rebuke, be careful not to shame someone. And be careful not to just let them feel your anger, and be careful that you are giving rebuke only when it can be heard, because if you are giving rebuke to somebody and they can't hear it, then you're just engaging in a bad exercise, right? So that's a reading of the sin, not as the sin that you're going to sort of, that you're also responsible for, but actually in the very process of giving rebuke, you might actually bear sin because of it. And a third one is actually reads this as surely give rebuke and don't bear sin. And it's actually reading the sin as going back to the very first part of the verse, which is the sin that you're going to carry around is actually the sin of hatred. That you're just going to walk through the world feeling angry and feeling a sense of hatred, and that you shouldn't be, this is saying you shouldn't be split in two. That you either have to forgive or you have to have these hard conversations, but you shouldn't be split in two. The verses, the Torah continues, Lo tikom v'lo titor et b'nei amecha. Don't take vengeance or bear a grudge. The rabbis say, if you don't do this, then you're going to end up taking vengeance. You're going to end up bearing a grudge. And then finally we get to this beautiful verse that we've talked about so many times, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's what comes immediately after these verses. Love your neighbor as yourself. Seeming to be the key to loving someone else is not hating, is going through this difficult process. The rabbis say, Ein ahava im ein tochacha. They say, Ein tochacha im ein ahava. You can't do this thing called rebuke if you don't have love. But also, you can't have, love doesn't exist unless you have these hard conversations. And I think they get it from the fact that v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself, comes after these other verses about doing rebuke and about not taking vengeance and not carrying a grudge. I want to finish today. I sometimes like to do teachings in my father's memory. It's not his yortzeit or anything like that, but there was a time when, and my father gave me permission when he was alive to share this story. There was a time when he and I were having a pretty difficult argument, and I once, he said to me, because I had spoken, let's just say, inappropriately, and he said to me, don't speak to me that way. I'm not one of your friends. And I said to him, thinking that I had won the argument, by hurting him, I said to him, "That's right. You're not one of my friends." And he said to me, he said, "You're lucky not to just have another friend. You have a father." And part of what he used to tell me is that part of his job was to say things to me that weren't just flattery and not just what I wanted to hear, but to tell me when I was acting in such a way that was not appropriate, and to tell me things that I didn't want to hear, to do this process of rebuke. It was not easy. I don't think I'm diminishing him by saying, I don't think sometimes he did it all in the right way. I don't think I do it all in the right way. It was not easy, but it was, what I do know is that it did come from a place of love. And I knew that I was loved, and it was part of a loving relationship. And so I want to just bring it together by saying that if we are to have love which endures, netzach, as my Father's love does for me, even though he's not in the world, to encourage us to move forward with those conversations as best as we can. Amen.